Now that we have all the variables we're going to use, it's time to actually update our warranty summary field. At this point in our trigger, we have enough code that it'd be helpful to readers if they had some comments to guide them. I added a few comments before proceeding. The plan for this field is basically to make it a giant string that adds predefined text with our variables. I start with the first section and use single quotes since I'm writing a string. To combine strings, we simply use the plus sign. Notice actually that we're combining a date with a string. Normally, adding different data types is confusing. For example, adding a decimal to a boolean wouldn't make sense. But for strings, we can add other data types to it, and Salesforce will do its best to automatically translate our data type to a string. This is going to be a really long string, so I'm going to continue it on a new line. Apex treats multiple spaces as one, so you're always free to use multiple spaces or even line breaks as a substitute for a single space. Now I add in the created date, which is a date time, but Salesforce lets you add that to strings as well. It's easy to forget a space here and there inside our string, and I noticed my error early and add a space into our template. Okay, end of sentence, and we need to start a new line in our template. We want our output to have some sort of formatting. The secret to adding a new line within a string is backslash, then the letter N. I like to think that the N stands for new line. We finish out the rest of the template, repeating the same methodology we used in earlier lines. Time to cross our fingers and save. Pass! Our code has compiled, meaning it's ready for end user testing. Before going further, I want to teach you something called variable scope. Variable scope determines what part of your code can see what variables. To illustrate, I'm going to take out the last line of our template and use a string variable instead. My OCD kicks in right about here, and I realign the equal sign to make the code pretty. Back to variable scope. What if I move this variable outside of our trigger loop? Would it still work? The answer is yes. Child blocks of code have access to variables created in their parent blocks of code, or their parents' parents' blocks of code. The same isn't true in reverse. Parent blocks of code do not have access to variables created inside child blocks of code. So this save will work, and now it's time to test. In Salesforce, I'm going to create a case, which will trigger our before insert trigger. I'll update the warranty fields and all required fields too. Using these inputs, I'd expect our warranty summary to have all the proper outputs, which includes a 10% warranty percentage, since only 1 day has passed since the purchase date and the warranty lasts for 10 days. Let's see what we actually get. Oh boy. There are at least 3 things wrong with this so far. First, the created date comes out to null. Second, I forgot the word days in the template. And third, our warranty percentage should be 10%, but it's actually 0. Let's fix these. Back to the Batmobile. Maven's Mate. First issue. The created date came out to null. Why? The reason why it came out to null is because we're using a before trigger. Remember, before triggers on insert don't have access to system populated fields such as ID and created date, because those fields are populated after a record is saved. 2 options. 1, change this to an after trigger, or 2, find the current date time in a different way. I'm going to go with option number 2, since there's a simple method that solves our problem here, and it's called datetime.now. If we change this to an after trigger, we'd need to explicitly save our case, which could potentially introduce the infinite looping scenario that we covered in Apex Academy number 1. Next error. Our percentage came out to 0% instead of 10%. On paper, our formula actually looks pretty good. It could be that I switched the positions using the days between method. Maybe the today should come before the purchase date. Upon testing though, you're going to find this doesn't actually solve our issue. It has to be something else. Here's a potential fix. Notice how we use this variable here in the denominator. This variable is of type integer, but our final output is of type decimal. Maybe if we used a decimal instead of an integer, we'd get better results. So, since we translated this field from a decimal to an integer earlier to solve our error, I'm going to use the original decimal version instead. Bam! Last error. I forgot to add a word in the template. Oops. The save works. Now it's time to do some more testing. I'll go back into Salesforce and create a case using the exact same parameters. It's a little bit better this time. Now we're getting 0.1% instead of 10%, but it's still better than 0% though. Here we have a classic math error. Since we're representing our number using a percentage, we gotta multiply by 100. Back in Maven's Mate, we do 100 times the entire formula, using parentheses around the original formula to make sure we don't get any order of operations issues. Save looks good. Back to Salesforce. I create another case and bam, problem solved. But there are still a few things I'd like to improve with this. I don't like how the dates are formatting. It's not really readable to have these zeros here, so let's clean that up a bit. Conveniently, there's a special method that formats dates and date times in a more readable way. It's literally called the format method. We call this method using dot notation, which again is something we'll go into more detail later. Upon save, we get an illegal assignment from string to date error. So the format method changes the date to a readable string, but we're saving it in a date variable. Let's update both our variables to string data types to get around this. Save again, and another error. Take my word for it that this many errors is completely normal. It does not make you a worse coder for getting errors. This is all part of the process, just like fixing formula fields with errors. Now, method does not exist or incorrect signature. String.days between date on line 10. Checking out line 10, that's right. We change the data type of purchase date to a string, and strings don't have the days between special method. So instead of using our variable here, I'm going to directly use the case product purchase date field. Finally, our save works. Back to Salesforce, create a case, and boom, problem solved. But wait, I think I can still break this. How convenient that our warranty percentage comes out to a nice round number. What if it didn't? This time, when I create a case, I'll make the warranty percentage come out to a number with infinite decimal places. And there we go. We just broke our warranty summary field. Let's fix this last error and we should be good to go. What we want is a way to limit the number of decimal places on our warranty percentage variable. Again, there's a special method for this specifically for the decimal data types. It's called setScale. To use setScale, we'll wrap our entire warranty percentage formula with parentheses. Type a dot so we can access special methods, then use setScale2. You may be wondering why we wrap the entire formula in parentheses first. We did this because we want to set the scale of the entire output, not just a portion of it. If I didn't add parentheses, we would have been setting the scale of just a portion of the formula, which could have unexpected results. Save works. Awesome. I'm going to clean up the code a bit now because most people don't like scrolling to the right to read code. While we're on the subject of clean code, a question. Why bother using variables in this trigger? Couldn't we have written it without using any variables in this section and just put all the logic directly into our warranty summary string? The answer is yes. We definitely could have done it that way, and we would have saved some lines of code in the process too. But remember, the goal isn't to have the fewest lines of code possible. It's more important to have readable code. And using these variables up here makes it a heck of a lot easier to process what we're doing and how it works. Back to Salesforce, create a case, and now, finally, our trigger is complete. Or is it? I leave it to you to think of a way to break our trigger. There's at least one thing I can think of that can go wrong. But to make this trigger fully bulletproof, we need to finish your training. You must learn all the fundamentals first. We'll be back. For now, take pride in the fact that you made a pretty complex trigger and fixed almost all of its bugs. It may have seemed like a lot of work, but remember, you're learning a new language with a learning curve. Like riding a bike, these things will click over time.